What it do, a.d.d fam? Crazy bitch back in this mug. So, I am going to do a little bit of a continuation of the last video. As I've discussed, I've done construction for nearly 30 years now, right? And so, in the world of construction, you may or may not be aware of this, but along with the life of construction runs neck and neck with a lot of the type of stuff I've been talking about: addiction, mental problems, all that kind of stuff. They run hand in hand, right? You know, let's just face it. You know, guys been in jail, been in out of prison. Most of us are in construction. You know, it's a lot of us. You know, it's just, you know, it's something we get into, a trait we can do without having to go to college for. We just learn it out in the field. So it's quite common in the world of construction. I've learned that you're gonna have a lot of guys very similar to me. Like I said, I've done time, been in all kind of trouble, in and out of trouble with the law, in relationships with people, drugs. They run neck and neck. And any and every job I've ever worked on, there's always been a druggie, a junkie, someone even worse than me. Sometimes I was that person worse than, but like I said, I've been in construction so long, and there's so many dudes in it that, you know, that the job requirements don't look for background check and this kind of shit, right? So this is one of the big reasons for it. So, as I've discussed, being in construction and being a recovered addict and a recovering mental health victim and constituent, I've been around a lot of these kind of dudes. That's, you know, pretty much all I've ever run with. And so back in this time that I was discussing, it was back in the time of the guy that gave me the shitty Christmas present, right? It was back in that era. I'm going to try not to use his name too much. I did a dumb thing. The last job I did, I talked about not putting people's name in there, and I turned right around and put dude's name in it. But that wasn't the point, as you could probably already figure it out. It was my wife's friend was the point that I had to redo it. So in this day and in this time, all the guys that I ever worked for, all the same, always picking up guys and working guys just like me, guys in and out of jail, guys that had just gotten out of prison. And so my buddy Mike, / ex-boss, at one point he had so many flunkies working for him. Before I even started working for him, I knew him. He worked for this contractor, this guy Kevin Kramer, that I had gone to high school with. This guy I had gone to school with, him and his brother. He wound up being a big contractor. The guy Doug I talked about did work for him. Mike worked for him too. So even before I ever even worked for Mike, I knew who he was 10 plus years before I ever even started working for him. We were on a few jobs working for the same contractor, and all his guys are over there talking about just got out of prison, they gotta go parole, they don't have a driver's license, all this kind of shit. You know, we'd all be on the job together, and you know, we'd go have a smoke break, and everybody talk about their problems, their situations, you know, where they're at. All of his employees were prison dudes, right? Didn't have driver's license, all this kind of shit. So I can remember that way back, like I said before, even start working for him. So then I come to work for him, and I meet his butt, and he did this, and the other guy Anthony, and the guy Doug, all three guys that I worked for, all did the same thing. Would get, you know, guys fresh out of prison and no driver's license. These guys are, you know, they're more controllable, they're more hungry, you know, they they work for cheaper. So all three guys I work for all used to, look for guys like this. Those are the guys that they wanted to work for them because, they could pay them peanuts and they do whatever they'd say. Guys like me, I most times had my shit together. I tell them go fuck themselves. They couldn't tell me, but they know, they knew the worse the person's shape was in, the easier they were to control. It was like that all through, still. So, anywho, the guy I discussed, Mike, he had all kind of jack legs when I went to work for him, off and on. His best friend, this guy Charlie, that he lived in this neighborhood, right? The house he had to move out of this neighborhood, and come to find out, there was this huge drug dealer lived 2 houses down from him in Cherokee County now, right? And I can't go put this guy's name out, but this guy was known. I had heard this guy's name for decades before I ever went to work for Mike and actually met him. This guy lived a couple houses down from Mike. This guy had the police paid off. This guy was selling kilos of meth and had kilos in his house and kept 30, 50 grand cash in his whatchamacallit, in his safe all the time. So this guy was an enormous drug dealer. Like I said, he even had the county, police paid off. So he was Mike's two-door down neighbor, and they used to have a squabble. This guy didn't like Mike. Mike didn't like him. As you already know, big drug dealer. This guy was a big drug dealer, and he did construction. And so, the guy I'm talking about, Mike, didn't like him. The guy had, traffic 24/7. Big, huge meth speed dealer. So, they didn't like each other. So, come to find out, Mike had made some phone calls, and you don't do this kind of shit. So, he basically called the boys behind this guy's back, right? And that's, like I said, I'm not putting no names out there, but a lot of people will know who I'm talking about. And so he put this guy's name out there, and so he had to carry his piece, because he had a mark on him. He had a price on his head at one time. He turned this guy in, and the guy had, like I said, I know through some other sources that the guy had, police on payroll and all that. So that's how he didn't get busted. But nevertheless, this guy that I worked for had turned him in. And so he had a price on his head. And he was all the time looking over his shoulder. All the time we'd be, in certain parts of town, and he'd be scared to death. He carried his piece right in his briefcase everywhere he went. Always knowing he's looking over his shoulder. So he had this huge drug dealer lived 2 houses down from him. He moves, and then he moves into this house I was talking about, where he had the where me and my wife Brenda, a friend of hers, over. So when in that neighborhood, he lived, and his best childhood buddy, this guy named Charlie, lived with him, right? So Charlie was his best bud. Helped him start his business together and all that, right? And Charlie was, another one of your no license guys. Never had driver's license. Was a drunk. Started drinking the second he got off work. Sometimes even before he'd get off work, he'd be drinking. Just one of those kind of dudes. And he had this wife, this lady Donna. And so they lived first they lived with Mike for a long time, many, many, many years. And so they finally branched off and they moved into this little house, and he had this wife, Donna, and Donna developed cancer, and during the last few years of our time together, Donna passed away. So Charlie did his thing. Charlie was best of friends with this huge drug dealer, right? And he's also Mike's buddy, so he's caught between a rock and a hard place. So, Charlie's playing middleman. One of his best childhood friends is this huge drug dealer. His other childhood best friends is Mike. And so he's got to, talk, and, he's the peacemaker between the two. So Charlie's another one. He's, like I said, no driver's license, drug addict. Always, he always had drugs. He always was getting speed, but he was a painter nonetheless. So he slowed down more and more. By the time I started coming around, he'd work, a couple of days a week, and he was, he just enough to get by. And so he went to, hardly working at all to not working at all. And so Charlie eventually was on a job, and he had a ladder on hardwood floors 2 stories in the air, and slipped and shattered his knee. Ruined him, right? Shattered his knee. He can now never get on a ladder again. So anyways, Mike, out of pity, would give Charlie work and feed him and all that. And so Charlie had a son, and you're already going to imagine. I'm explaining to you what Charlie was like. Now imagine what his son was like, okay? Charlie's dad was a judge down in somewhere. He lived down in South Georgia, Tifton. And so Charlie's dad was a judge, right? But Charlie was, drug addict, drunk, all that. But his father wasn't. So Charlie's father was a judge and a decent man and all that, whatever, probably well-to-do. But then Charlie had a son, Chris. And Chris, before I had known him, had lived down in Tifton and was just ADD gone wild times 10, right? Chris was worse than me. At this time, I'm many, many years away from shooting dope yet. This guy Chris comes on the job, and he's shooting dope. I'm probably in my early 30s. He probably in his early 20s, and he's been to prison 2-3 times. He's already all tatted up, both arms sleeved, back piece, shoulder, chest plate, blasted, right? And he's only in his early 20s. Chris is a pretty decent sized dude. Well, you could tell, from his demeanor and the way he acted and shit, he was, like me, a fighter. He fought a lot, you could tell. And so he was always starting shit, yada, yada, yada. So Chris comes to work for us now, right? He comes down here from Tifton. First he's going to try him out, see how it goes. He goes from to starting to work with us. Now he moves in with Mike, so now he's working with us full time. So now we get to working together. We're together every day, and he's riding with me, and Mike's not around. So now he's coming back into more his own, asking me where the drugs at. Can I get him this, that, and the other? I'm in my early 30s. I partied hard in those days. So yeah, of course I'm going to hook you up with whatever you want. And so I would hook him up with dope, coke, speed, weed, pills, whatever he wanted, I'd get it for him. He was a big geeker. He liked to shoot coke, and and snort and shoot speed. He was big into it, way before I ever even shot any dope. So like I said, I'm going quite a few years ago now. And so this guy's now shooting dope. He's now moved into Mike's. Mike, as I discussed, is about as clean as a whistle. He don't do shit. This kid's in his house banging dope every day, and he goes back, and Chris goes back home for the weekend. While he's gone, he's living at Mike's now, but while he's gone, Mike goes in there and snoops all through his shit and finds the needles. Asks me about it, asks me, what do I think? What would I do about it? What do you think I should? What do I think he should do about it? I said, it's none of your business, Let him do his thing. I don't care, People doing their own life, it's their own business. That's what I told him. He works good, So, and like I said, Mike was hard to get along with, and he was hard to find help. So, he didn't have no place being that picky. So he come back to work, and he's still doing dope. all the time. Every Friday we get paid, and he's begging me, more or less, take him with me and go get him some dope. So now every Friday after work we go cash our checks. Sometimes we go to Red Lobster, as I discussed, and he comes with me, and I go take him back to my house and I get him dope. He does his thing. I take him back. I make something out of the deal. I take him back home. He does his thing. So now he's big into the dope. And one of these Fridays, okay, so he's living with Mike at this time, right? Now I'm seeing, and this kid's telling me every day and on the daily what it's like. We get off work sometimes 2:30, 3 o'clock. This kid, this guy I'm talking about, this boss, he's a freaking, I discussed how he was, he's a shit, he can be a shit bag. He's using the hell out of this kid. We're getting off work 2:30, 3 o'clock, and he's having to go home and do all kind of house chore errands type shit. He says, he's telling me every day the type of shit Mike's asking him and expecting him to do. And he's paying rent too. And I was getting madder and madder about it, right? Every day he's telling me, a different circumstance, and I've already discussed the guy's a fucking prick, right? And so, he's, as usual, he's, using people and running this kid rampant. He gets off work every day and he's making his kid do all his chores, house chores and shit, which, you don't do, ain't right? So this goes on for some time. As of everything, it always ends bad. There's always going to come a boiling point, an end point. In any and every story that I have, there's always going to be an ending and a fallout. So, like I said, this continues. This goes on and on and on for months and months. I'm hearing, seeing, and watching this kid getting abused, right? It just because he does drugs and this and that, there's no reason to treat him like, treat him any different than you would your own family or friends or whatever. So Mike's taking advantage of this kid, and he's, treating him like a bitch and all that. And so it finally hit its it reached the boiling point. So after this, like I said, this goes on and on and on. And then one of these Fridays, this kid comes home with me. Chris comes home with me. We go back to my house. I get him some speed, get him some coke. We go where I lived. I've done videos about it. Where I lived in Kent, the place in Kennesaw was like right next to the trailer park and all that. Like dope was, and I had a dope dealer that lived, a couple miles. This black guy lived down the street that sold coke, and I could get meth, walking distance. So, like I said, every Friday get off work, and I'd be getting coke and speed. So this one Friday we get some coke and speed, and we sitting at my dining room table, just as always, average Friday normal thing. I get some dope, and I bust it out of my dining room table, and any and all of my friends who I'm kicking it with, the neighborhood kids, this kind of shit, my brother-in-law and his friends, all this kind of shit, party at my house 9 times out of 10. And so it's party at my house, and we're sitting there, and it only takes me a bump. I do a bump. He starts telling me this shit again, and now I'm in like a psychosis. You ever been or heard of like people like go into a psychosis, some shit like tunnel vision? Well, I went there. I got there. This bump, this line of speed, and him talking all that shit about this dude gave me tunnel vision that I wanted to kill this motherfucker for real. Like this shit was ringing in my head. Beat his ass. The devil, good and bad, was whispering there, beat his ass, Mike. Beat his ass, Mike. Beat his ass, Mike. The shit was ringing in my head. Beat his ass. This kid's sitting here telling me about how this fucking piece of shit's, making him do his chores every day when he gets home. totally using him, taking advantage of him. That was it. Did that big ass fucking blast, hit that ringer, told dude with this look on my face, get in the car. Get in the car. It's done with. This is the last day. It's done with. It's done and over with. Today. Right here. Right now. He said, what are you going to do? I said, don't worry about it. Get in the fucking car. And I'm like in, psycho ADD Mike mad at the world mode. And I got a Mustang at the time. A 96 Mustang. And I floored over there. I'm hot. I'm on fire. We get over his house. Buddy's looking at me, and he's kind of he's timid looking now for the first time. He's kind of like scared, like what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? How bad am I gonna make it for him? Because he knows I'm fixing to go ape shit on Mike. I'm sitting there, speed demon, mad as fuck. Smoke coming out of my nose, mad. And so he knows I'm fixing to blast off on. He knows I'm fixing to go ape shit on Mike. So he's worried about what's going to happen to him. So we're about to get out of the car. I said, don't worry about it. I said, just stay outside. He said, you sure? I said, just stay outside, dude. Just give me 10, 15 minutes. You stay outside. I go up there. I go in. And I say, I tell him, Mike's on his front porch, sweeping or dusting. He's sitting there just... his normal routine. He's doing something where he's waiting for us to come or Chris to come back, and he's just, he's sweeping the front porch, whatever. He's gonna be right there when Chris gets there. You see what I'm saying? To be a little pumpkin bitch and tell him, he's gonna do this and this. So he's every time Chris leaves, when he comes back, here's this guy on the porch pretending to sweep or whatever, and he's gonna, tell this kid all that he's got to do for the day. This happened, like I said, all the time. So that day I tell him, stay here, made him sit in my car, walked up there. He said, what's up, Mike? And he just looked up like nothing was matter. He hadn't seen the expression on my lips. I said, we need to go inside and have a chat. He said, what's the matter? What's wrong? I said, it's best if we go inside. He said, okay. What's the matter? I said, just wait. I went inside the house. I want to make sure we was inside the house. Door was shut. No neighbors. Nobody seen nothing. I went off on this dude like you could. If you could only imagine seeing my videos and how hyperactive and all that shit I am, you could imagine me geeked up as fuck listening to this guy talk about how he's abusing this kid, making him do all his chores every day after work. This kid can't even go out. He's got to be in the house at 9 o'clock, lights off. All this, abusive, control freak tactic type shit. He had done all this disgusting ass shit to this kid. Like I said, lights out, in the house at 9 o'clock. I mean, and the kid was having to pay him rent. I went fucking stupid on this man for about 20 minutes straight, without a breath, without a blink, without letting him counter in otherwise. I went completely ape shit unglued on him, and never gave it a breath until I'd gotten every bit of it out. And he's like, and I said, and fuck you, and go fuck yourself, you son of a bitch. I quit. I fire myself. So fuck you. Don't even think it, bitch. And the whole time I'm like, I'm making moves at him and shit. And he's like, flinching and stuff, because I'm really wanting to fight him. I'm wanting to punch him. And I'm trying to get him to fight me. I'm punking him and all that, I'm in his face. I'm talking and, spitting on his face and all that. I'm trying to get him to fucking swing on me. I'm wanting him to swing, you know what I'm saying? I'm so mad. I go apeshit ballistic on him, tell him, go fuck yourself. I fire myself, don't even try it, and left. And, a few days gone by, going half a week, and, he apologized, brought me back to work, but the kid, he couldn't last that much longer. I had made it to where if Mike had something like that from that day forward, all the guys that he would work and have, weren't allowed to be, I wasn't to be a part of that world at all. See what I'm saying? Like, I made that for anyone else that ever worked for this man. I paid the way for them. So I thought that one was rather interesting. Like I said, that dude, he finally got his. Like I said, I laid into him. I've been in many, many, many fights, and I've never yelled at someone for that loud and for that long. I literally was yelling at him for 20 minutes straight. Not a breath, spitting on him, all that, right in his face. Hoping and praying, wishing that he would swing on me so I could beat the fuck out of him, And it, like I said, it's another one you had to be there. And, I fought that kid's battles for him. But that kid wound up being in all kind of shit. He was robbing houses. During this time now, right after this, he goes to breaking into people's houses in the neighborhood, breaking into cars, stealing shit. He's stealing shit from Mike. He's got dirty rigs in the bedroom, and then Mike eventually gets where he can't take it, and he kicks him out. But before he did, it went to all kind of shit shows. It was another guy that we had brought to work, this Mexican, and this Mexican brought this rock of meth, like this big, for $50, like enough to do for like a lifetime. This Mexican gave me and Chris this red crank ice, like this big, for $50. So Chris was doing it, day and night and morning breakfast and dinner. So it got to be a all out shit show. I can only imagine. With him doing that kind of dope and never sleeping, and he's got the lights on all night. He lived with Mike, and it was problem after problem after problem. He had been to prison several times. Charlie, his dad, had been to prison several times. Charlie's brothers were outlaw bikers. The huge drug dealer, Charlie's friend, lived 2 houses down from Mike, was outlaw bikers. One crazy ass redneck country style version of Melrose Place, if you can envision that. Because you gotta think, it was Mike and his buddy Charlie. They lived 2 houses down, this drug dealer, and they lived across the street. Lived this lady, this girl. She was a woman, but she did speed and ice and all that. And she was, they're friends. So like I said, they were all like country biker type people. So it was a redneck Melrose Place. I figured that was a good one. We're home now. It's the a.d.d.